Hello, my name is Kate, and I am bringing you into my kitchen today for the first time. And this is going to be a new channel for me called Canning with Kate. And the main purpose of this is just to kind of walk together and learn together. And I have been canning now for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, and I have absolutely fallen in love with it. It's a lot of fun. I love filling my pantry shelves with good food, fresh food that is not going to go bad. I love being able to provide meals for my family that I know what are in it, that I feel good about serving them, that don't have chemicals or additives or anything like that in them. And they taste really, really good, and they always taste really fresh. And none of my kids have ever complained about it. Maybe you need to season it with a little bit of salt once you open the jar and serve it, but that's about it. Everything else is just amazing. And a lot of my friends have expressed interest. I know family members have started canning, and I wanted to just bring you all on my own journey and share with you the tips and tricks and just kind of have fun together, learning and doing what we can to provide for our families, for ourselves. And so this is just a great way to bring you in on this journey with me. I know that canning has always been something that grandparents have done, great grandparents have done many, many, many years. So it's definitely safe, and I'll show you the safe ways to do things. There are also rebel ways to do things that we can discuss. And then a lot of people want to start canning because of grocery prices going up. And so whenever you find a really great sale on produce or on meat, you just don't know how to use it within such a short period of time, you can can it. And then it preserves it for future meals, for future times. And it's a really great way to provide for your family, to prepare for unexpected times. Maybe there's an emergency that happens and you have no food on the shelf ready to eat. You don't have time to cook a big meal, then you can just grab something off your pantry shelf and heat it up, and you've got dinner and a meal in 10 minutes, which is amazing. So I just wanted to show you what the basics are today and show you what I have and what tools are really useful in your canning journey. So let's get started. The first thing I have is my All-American canner. Now there is a difference between a pressure canner and a pressure cooker. So the pressure cooker, if it's solely a pressure cooker, cannot be used to safely can food or to preserve. Now this is my All-American, like I said, and it is the 921 model. This holds up to 7 quarts and it holds up to 18 pints. So the way it holds 18 pints is that you use this little insert. It always goes on the bottom because you never ever want to have your jars flat on the bottom of your canner ever. So you can, the All-American itself comes with 2 of these. So you have one on the bottom, and then you stack your pints on the first row, and then you would put the second one of these inserts on top of those, and then you would stack whatever else you have left in your pints on the second shelf. So I did a lot of research and a lot of reading on the type of canner that I wanted, and the reason the All-American was because it doesn't have a rubber seal gasket and it has a weighted gauge. Now the weighted gauge to me was important because if you only have the dial gauge, you need to take that and get it checked every year. And with the rubber gasket, you also need to make sure that you have extras available in case you need to replace it at some point, which you will, because the rubber gasket is not indestructible. You will need to replace the gasket at some point. And I didn't want to deal with that. I didn't want to deal with the dial gauge and getting it checked to make sure that it is properly pressurizing every year, and I did not want to mess with the rubber gasket. So this All American has no rubber gasket. It's a complete metal to metal seal. This is the lid. Now it does have the dial gauge right here, which you can use. It is useful because I can tell when it's getting up close to pressure. And this is the weighted gauge. Okay, this weighted gauge is never going to have to be replaced unless, you know, for whatever reason it cracks or God forbid something happens to it or you lose it, then you would need to replace it. Otherwise it will always be accurate. So you can see it has a 5 pound, 15 pound, and a 10 pound. For where I am located, I always use my 10 pound gauge, or the 10 pound weight. So you need to check and see what altitude you're at where you're living, and that will determine whether you use the 5, 15, or the 10. That's very important. Then this is the pressure release, or the vent valve. So you will see a bunch of steam coming out of this as pressure builds, and that's a good thing. Right here is the emergency button. So if for whatever reason you get too much pressure building in your canner, this will pop out and it will help to release the pressure safely. So it's just right here. It easily comes out. And this you might need to replace. So it's just a tiny little rubber stopper, I guess, and it's very easy to put back in. And this is the only part that you might need to replace at some point. If this ever does blow because there's too much pressure that has gotten into your canner, then you will need to replace it for sure. But if it never gets released, then it should be fine. So the way that you situate this, you can see these little guys. This just twists and it hooks onto this part. This arrow lines up with this notch, and that tells you where your lid is supposed to be lining up. You always want to make sure that this is level with the rest of your canner, which on the All American can be tricky. It does definitely take a learning curve. And then these are what seals the canner. So you just twist those on all the way around. There's 6 of them. So you twist them all on, and I can show you that once we actually start canning. But there's 6. These are the sealing little doohickeys here. I love my gas stove, and there's some questions. If you have an electric stove, then you need to make sure that your electric stove is suited for canning, because sometimes they're not, and they're not advisable. Sometimes the glass cooktop will crack. So I really prefer having a gas stove because then I don't need to worry about it. But I know a lot of people don't have a gas stove, or maybe they can't have a gas stove because they don't have the gas lines. So if you do have an electric cooktop, just make sure that your particular cooktop is acceptable for the canning process, because there's a lot of weight that goes into your canner. Now, let me show you the other special tools that you will need to make sure you have to start your canning adventure. Starting with, this is called a debubbler. You can get just a little kit that comes with this. It's a debubbler, and also gives you the measurement, because you will need to have specific head space on your items that you're canning. So there's a 1/4 inch mark, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and a 1 inch. Typically I use the 1 inch or the 1/4 inch. And then when you need to debubble, you just poke this around your jar and it gets all the air bubbles out. This is the funnel. So it's just a very basic funnel, nothing fancy, nothing special. But I use this one a lot more often actually than I use this one. This one is kind of fancy. It tells you 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4, and then the bottom is going to be your 1 inch mark. And so this one is a little bit more fancy. I found it at a resale shop and thought it was cool, so I picked it up, but I actually don't use it very much. I prefer this one. This is just a jar opener. I got this in my kit, my canning kit. Sometimes it's very useful if I can't get a jar lid open. This is great. This is my ladle. I actually had a ladle that did not have these little notches. I love the notches because when you pour your liquid into your jar, it helps to not make a mess. But this is not necessary, just you do need a ladle though. And then this is called the jar lifter. So you're gonna have hot jars. So you just, actually I'll show you here. You just take your jar lifter, put it over the lip of your jars, squeeze, and you can lift your jars like that out of the canner. And you can also put them into the canner with the jar lifter. So those are the basic tools of what you're gonna need to get started. Then the last thing I wanted to show you was 4 different sizes of and what I have in them, and then we can get started canning next week. So this is your 1 quart jar. This is, I canned a quart of beans. My family goes through baked beans like nobody's business. So you can see I labeled it. I didn't put the name on it because we know what they are, but I put the date as June 20th. 2023. So we know when it was canned, and they're the pinto beans. This is your pint-sized jar, and I did pears and light syrup, and I canned this in March of 2023. These are really fantastic. This is your 1/2 pint jar, or known as your jelly jars. I did cranberry orange sauce in November of 2022. This was a really yummy thing. It's perfect for Thanksgiving. And then this is also a 1/2 pint jar, but it's a wide mouth. So this is strawberry soft spread. We use it just like jelly or jam. My kids love it. And these are awesome reusable lids. So once you open something, you can just pop these lids on instead of using the metal lids. So these 2 are for jellies and jams and stuff, or any other things that use just a tiny bit of, like condiments and whatnot. This is your pint, and this is your quart. So obviously you are going to need mason jars and the lids. And these are called the flats. You always keep the flats. When you start to store, you take off the ring. So the thing that seals it is you have to remove those after it has sealed. So there's the 4 different types of jars, and you larger jars, there's gallon jars and stuff like that, but I don't can with those. So that's it. I hope that this was a good start. I hope that this is going to help you get started on your journey. Look into getting a canner, look into getting jars, and you can find the kits for your canning tools for very inexpensive on Amazon. You can get them at Walmart. Sometimes they even have them at your local grocery store. But I look forward to starting this with you, and let's look forward to doing a canning next week. Thank you for watching. Bye.